Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
You are an art historian, right? You formed yourself at the Courtauld Institute, right? Was everything at the Courtauld, because in the bio there is that your master and PhD is all at the Courtauld. So you were formed at the Courtauld Institute?
That's correct, yeah, I was formed there, yeah.
And then you mostly work in contemporary art, right? You work at the Tate Gallery, you work at the Metropolitan Museum in New York.
Yeah.
As I read in your bio, you had a stage or something in your early days here at the National Portrait Gallery. But then you went into the contemporary art world.
Yeah.
How come you came back here? I mean,
good question. So I worked at the National Portrait Gallery when I was a student at the Courtauld, when I was finishing my BA, during my MA, and I think even at the very beginning of my PhD, all three of which were at the Courtauld, as you say. So I worked here part-time as a guard, basically a visitor service assistant, which is just a part-time job to pay the bills, which many students do. I used to work here Thursday and Friday evening. But I loved it. I spent a lot of time in the galleries, with the collection, looking at the paintings, reading labels, talking to the visitors. So, I never thought I'd end up back here, especially not running the place. But it was something I enjoyed. I've always loved the gallery. I enjoyed working here. And little did I know, years later, I think it was about, 12 years later, when I was having my interview to become director, one of the things the trustees, of course, asked me, I'm sure all the candidates, was they would show me images from the collection, say, what is this? And because I spent so many hours in the galleries, I was able to say, George Romney self-portrait 1784 or whatever. So I didn't know it would be useful. Anyway, but as you say, I had a history with this place, and then through my studies, so obviously a BA at the Courtauld in History of Art, everything from the classical to the contemporary. My MA was post-war French art, my PhD was arte povera, so post-war Italian art. I moved towards the contemporary, and then of course at Tate Modern for 6 years, I think. However, because my background is the history of art in general, and I, beyond that, always retained interests in other periods. And in my free time on weekends or holidays, I'm looking at lots of other things that isn't just contemporary art or art fairs. And that kind of explains the move to the Met in New York from the Tate, in that obviously although I was in the modern and contemporary department, what excited me about the Met was working in an encyclopedic museum and being able to make connections between different periods and cultures. And in a way, the same here, that what excited me about the National Portrait Gallery, beyond my history with the place and my love of it, and an understanding of the potential of what it could become, was working in an institution that spans more than 5 centuries. And even just other things I've done as sort of side projects, for example, an exhibition I curated back in 2011, feels like a long time ago now, which was about Cy Twombly and Nicolas Poussin at Dulwich Picture Gallery, making a connection between Cy's work and that.
Where did you do this?
Dulwich Picture Gallery in South London. It was their bicentenary, and they wanted to do an exhibition. They asked me to do an exhibition to celebrate their bicentenary as the oldest purpose-built picture gallery in the UK.
You also did a Matisse exhibition, which was rather successful
with Nick Sirota at the Tate Modern, but the Twombly Poussin show, the idea was, they said, would you do a show? And they have obviously Dulwich has a great collection of works by Poussin, and at the same time that they asked me, it must have been 2008, 2009, I'd just done the Twombly show at Tate Modern, the retrospective. And in doing that show, talking to Cy, I knew that, weirdly, his hero, many heroes, but really, in the conversations I had with him, the hero was Poussin. And I thought it was fascinating that someone like Twombly, an abstract artist, would be looking at a very controlled classicist. So I've always been interested in trying to make connections between them.
Maybe it's because Poussin is French, but he's a Roman painter, and because Twombly is American and he's a Roman painter somehow. Gaeta, therefore there may be a Roman connection between the two of them.
Exactly, and that's what was so interesting about the project. When you look beyond this surface appearance You know, they were both, Poussin and Twombly were 30 when they moved to Rome. They were both 64 when they painted the Four Seasons. And between those two bookends, there's many parallels.
64 when what?
When they painted the Four Seasons. So obviously Poussin's Four Seasons in the Louvre and Si's two versions in the Tate and MoMA in New York. It's a coincidence, but it's an interesting coincidence. But I mean, the main point is that both of them spent the bulk of their careers in Rome looking at classical subjects, mythology, antiquity, landscape, and looking at these timeless themes in two very different idioms. So I think it's good to think about things in different ways and make connections. I would never want to just look at contemporary art in a vacuum, and I don't think a lot of the artists I work with. So right now, you know, we're preparing for an exhibition for Elizabeth Peyton, which opens next month, early October.
You're preparing an exhibition of whom?
Elizabeth Peyton, and that's opening next month, and I've been working very...
We published an interview with her.
Yeah, it's a really good one, actually.
I interviewed her in Salzburg at Tadeusz Ropak house.
Yeah.
She was a friend of Tadeusz.
We were just there this weekend.
Where? At Tadeusz?
In Salzburg, yeah.
Yeah, he's a wonderful host.
He's great.
Yeah. We went to the opera, I guess.
Yes, we did. She was a big opera fan. But Elizabeth is looking at all kinds of things, from contemporary art and film and music, of course, all the way back. And the catalogue, which is, I have to say, is really beautiful and very special. It's like an artist book, very much reflects that. And one thing we're doing with her show is there will be a solo presentation on the ground floor, but we're also taking her works throughout the galleries, from the Tudor Gallery all the way through to the Victorian.
And you have Sidney Sherman at the moment.
Yeah, that's on now. And I think artists find it interesting to work within this very particular context of a portrait gallery, one that spans 5 centuries, one that is more about, there's two aspects to the gallery. There's the collection, which is essentially...
Two aspects at the National Gallery.
At the National Portrait Gallery. Yeah. The collection, obviously, is focused very much on British history, and the other point about that...
British history that goes from when to when?
We tend to start with the Tudors. We really start with the Plantagenets.
Tudors, which would be 14...
Yeah, so Henry VII. One thing that we're doing is we have works that even go back a bit earlier, and we're jumping around a bit now. But one of the things that we will do when we reopen, because one of the things that we are asked by our visitors the most is why do you begin with the Tudors? And it's a very good question. And so what we will do is probably go back and look at the medieval period, the Plantagenets. But then to go back to the point, so the first part of the gallery is about the collection, which goes from British history from the Tudors, as you asked, to now. The second part of the gallery...
From the Tudors to today,
yeah.
How many paintings or drawings you have in this part of the collection?
So in the primary collection, we have about 12,000 objects, mostly paintings, but also works on paper, sculpture.
And how many are on show?
Here, at any one time, about 1,000.
So you have 11,000 on storage?
Well, not all in storage. We have them also. We have partnerships across the UK, so many things are on loan across the UK, long loan, or loans for exhibitions.
How do you make the turnover? I mean, you have 11,000 either outside or in storage. Yeah. How do you change them,
Oh, we rotate things all the time. So as we lend very generously. So as we lend, obviously if you lend one thing, you have to replace it with something else. And we refresh our displays, so things are moving around quite often.
Some of them are real masterpieces. I mean, there are some iconic portraits. Which ones, for instance?
Oh, well, starting with, I suppose, the Holbein cartoon of Henry VII and Henry VIII. Just thinking, if we were to walk through the galleries from the Tudors, the Holbein, I suppose some of the images of Elizabeth I, whether it's the Ditchley portrait, or we have many of Elizabeth I that are quite remarkable. Of course, the Chandos portrait of Shakespeare, which is NPG number 1, and that was the founding work for the collection. It was the first work to enter the collection when we were formed in 1856, and that's why it's NPG number 1.
1856 is when the collection started?
When the gallery is founded, yeah. That's quite a special work because it's supposedly the only lifetime image of Shakespeare. So it's the only image that is presumably made from the life. The Van Dyck self-portraits, which is a more recent acquisition, but is a phenomenal painting, an extraordinary self-portrait. And obviously Van Dyck is such an important artist, such an important European artist.
When you say recent acquisition, not yours, did you buy it?
No, it was bought in 2014, I think. Well, one thing that we have acquired recently, which fills a big gap, is we didn't have a good image of Wellington, which is, even again since our founding in 1856, that's been on our list of gaps to fill. And so we acquired 2 years ago a very beautiful, unfinished portrait of Wellington by Thomas Lawrence that's hanging in the galleries now. We also have a wonderful, unfinished Thomas Lawrence again, portrait of William Wilberforce in the same gallery. One thing that's quite unique about the collection is that we also commission. We're the only national institution or museum that doesn't just acquire but commissions. We commission several things every year, but one recent thing was the portrait of Malala by Shirin Neshat. So the collection essentially focuses on British history. And the point about that is that one of the founding principles was that we would acquire based on the sitter, not the artist. So, for example, the Chandos portrait of Shakespeare, that's important because of the sitter, not because of the quality of the painting itself. So that's one very important part of the MPG, which is that it's essentially a visual history or biography of Britain. But the exhibition program, which is the second part, is about portraiture as a genre. And so that is international, which is why we do Cézanne or Cindy Sherman. And it is any period, any medium, painting, photography, sculpture, film, monographic, biographical, thematic.
And there's a lot of photography, right?
Yeah, that's very important for us.
For instance, you had major shows on...
Well, obviously we have Cindy Sherman now, although I don't think of her as a photographer per se. Earlier this year we had Martin Parr. Last year we had Victorian Giants that looked at the birth of photography as an art form and as a science, as a medium in the 19th century. So photography is a very important part of our exhibition program and our collection. And we have around 250,000 photographs in the collection. It's one of the great photography collections in the world. Many of them are more archival images, and we have a very important and interesting archive, but it's one of the great photography collections. And we have extraordinary things that are very well known, whether you think of images of Oscar Wilde or Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
And then also war history you have, more historical ones. So you have a large archive, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
And also a library.
Yeah, the Heinz Library and Archive, which was founded and supported by Drew Heinz. She's been a great friend to the gallery over the years.
And this is in the same building?
Just downstairs, yeah. It's a wonderful resource.
Who comes there? Students, or you need a special license? Or
No. I mean, the general public, researchers, students, scholars, cataloguers, because it's where you can research the iconography of an individual. So you search for the individual. Say you want to look for images of, it could even be someone who's not so well known. We have all kinds of fascinating things.
How many visitors come to the gallery, all together?
All together? So, now the question is to the building here in London, or to what we do around the country, or even around the world, or online, and all of those things are important. So,
the building in London?
To the building in London, it varies between sort of 1.7, 2 million, depending on the year, around that mark. And then, in terms of the national and international program, we're becoming much more active, and we want to lend and share the collection around the country, because it's a national collection. It's not just that we are a national museum, but our collection is about people from all four corners of the country.
You mean the country, you show it in museums in Manchester?
Everywhere, yeah. Internationally, that's gone up exponentially, so we do more now than ever before. I think when I started 4 years ago, this is a crude metric, but it's indicative. I think we got about £50,000.
4 years ago you started?
Yes. We got about £50,000 a year from international tours, and now it's more than 600,000. It's gone up. And then the website and digital, which is increasingly important. I've just been told today we're on track to hit 6 million visitors, which would be a record for this year.
They keep on saying that you want to make major changes, that there will be major changes, that you try to raise a lot of money. What is the kind of change you want to make? I mean, but in the same time I read that you are not the kind of guy who wants to call, who knows, Calatrava or Renzo Piano to do a new building, but you like to use what you have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so what is the thing?
The first thing to say is that even as director, especially as director, you never do these things alone. It should never really be about you or what you want to do, meaning me. It's got to be what the institution needs. It's got to be something that everyone is behind, including the trustees. The capital campaign, which we've almost finished now, which is 35.5 million, and that's the most money we've ever raised. That wasn't just something that I decided upon on a whim or out of ego. I was appointed already with the idea that this is something that we should do, we needed to do a major refurbishment of the gallery. So the trustees and staff had already decided that and appointed me to deliver that and to shape it with colleagues. So rather than just adding a new wing, building a new wing, grafting something new onto something that's already there, it's a complete refurbishment of all of the gallery, top to bottom.
And who does this?
Jamie Fogart, the architect, who's very good. And he is Canadian by birth, but he's been living in London since the 1980s. He trained with David Chipperfield, and his star is on the rise. He won Museum of the Year last year for Taste and Vibes.
And you have the Duchess of Cambridge, right, in your book.
We do.
Who's very close to this institution.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, she's fantastic.
And she has contributed a lot for this fundraising.
She's a very committed patron, so she comes to events. When we do a fundraising gala, that's incredibly helpful. But I think what's interesting about her is that she has a real interest and understanding in what we do, especially photography. And of course she studies history of art at St Andrews University. And so it's fortuitous that we have a royal patron who has a real interest in what we do. Also, the Prince of Wales is involved here, or no? Next door. Yeah, she is. She is. He's the patron. The National Gallery, our neighbours. What is the relationship between you and the National Gallery? Between these two galleries who share more or less the same neighbourhood? Well, we have a very good and close relationship as neighbours. I have an excellent relationship with Gabriele Finaldi, the director, who I like very much, I respect. The two institutions, and perhaps here more importantly their directors, maybe haven't always had, traditionally, historically, the easiest relationship. But Gabriele and I very much see eye to eye, and we get on, and we talk a lot, we have lunch, because we're doing big building projects, they're doing building projects. And I think it's very important to me that if we're going to do something, Gabriele hears it from me first, not from the press or from... We've built a very good relationship. We're separate institutions, but we're neighbours, so... But we're both national institutions. Yes, right? Yeah. You're public museums. Yes. People don't pay to come in. No, we're free, which is very important to me. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to come back to London. That I think the fact that museums in this country are free, which means that anyone can walk in. There's no... Also the exhibitions are free? No, those... Because the Metropolitan is private, but it's free. I mean, you can give what you want. Not anymore. Not anymore? No. You used to be able to. I used to do that. It's only the National Gallery of Washington that is free. That's right, yeah. I mean, there are different models, the American model and the British model. My life was changed by going to museums that were free, and that's why I do what I do, and I want to pass on to as many people as possible, as many different types of people. And so I feel that motivates me.
The government, the governments, wherever they are, they give money.
They do, yeah.
They give 100% money.
No. We're about 30% funded by the government. We're one of the least government-funded major national museums. So we raise about 70% of our total operating costs ourselves, which is a lot.
If you don't have ticketing.
Well, I mean, the exhibition tickets, the shop, the restaurant, the cafe, sponsorship, membership, all kinds of things. Fees from international tours, lots of things, but lots and lots of constant fundraising.
And this is all part of your job?
Yes.
So you have many jobs, I mean, as a director, right?
Yeah.
So you have to take care of the, let's say, money side, to find the 70%.
Correct.
To pay the employees. How many people work here?
Right now we're on about 260 in total. So it's quite a lot. It's not the biggest, but it's not nothing.
And you have to obviously take care of the renovation, right? So you work close to the architect.
Exactly.
What is the concept? You want to show more paintings, or you want to have more space for exhibitions, or you want to show them in a different way? All this.
All of those things. And that's what I like about it, that it's really a holistic approach about taking everything about the gallery and using all of those aspects, rehanging all 40 galleries for the first time, top to bottom, Tudors to now, improving the entrance, creating a learning centre. We bought back the East Wing from the National Gallery, restoring that was built to the National Portrait Gallery, and we swapped it with them in the 90s. Long story. So it's not about just adding on something new. It's about making the most of everything, the building, its contents, the collection.
And this will be ready when?
March 23.
How many exhibitions you do?
About 6 big exhibitions a year, and then lots of other displays. And
so what do you have in mind for this year, this coming year?
so we have, obviously we have Cindy Sherman now. Next we have Elizabeth Peyton, and then 2 weeks after that, a really fascinating exhibition called Pre-Raphaelites Sisters, which Jan Marsh, who's one of the great Pre-Raphaelite scholars, is curating. And it's a feminist reading of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, hence Pre-Raphaelite Sisters. So it's looking at the role that women played in that movement, not just as models, but as active collaborators, artists, instigators. And that will be, I think, really fascinating. And then next year, we have David Hockney Drawings, which looks at David as a draftsman from the 1950s to now, because really, to me, he's a supreme draftsman first and foremost. He's a great painter, of course. This exhibition is very particular, so it's around 5 sitters who he has depicted repeatedly over many years. So self-portraits from the 50s to now. His mother, Laura, Celia Birtwell, Gregory Evans, and Morris Payne. So 5 sitters. And then after that we have Cecil Beaton's Bright Young Things.
You had already one, Cecil Beaton, not long ago.
It was a while ago now. I mean, Roy Strong did the famous one in the 1960s, and we did a Cecil Beaton show 10 years ago?
No.
More. No, it was about 10 years ago now. But this one's a little different, which is looking at the Bright Young Things. So it's looking at the 1920s.
At the 1920s.
Exactly. Just that decade. And then lots more to come.
Any acquisition you would like to do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're constantly acquiring and commissioning. And I can't say much about things that aren't announced. But, so for example, in the last year, we acquired the beautiful portrait of Dylan Thomas by Augustus John, and that's been on loan to us for many years. So we acquired that, and currently that's in Swansea as part of our national programme. We acquired at auction for a complete bargain a portrait of Jane Seymour. We didn't have a good painting of Jane Seymour, and it's on display now, and it's workshop of Hans Holbein the Younger, and some bits may even be autographed, but we got it for nothing. And we've conserved it, and it's beautiful. You can see it in the Tudor Gallery now. So we're constantly filling gaps.
But, what is strange is that we talk about portrait, and you say there is no museum of portraits. But what about the Prado, for instance, where there's all the royal family in all kind of sort of shapes, and at the same time the poor man, or the dwarf, or, by Velázquez, all this Goya Velázquez painting, down the portrait.
Well, of course, there's
Or the Van Dyck, as you say, Van Dyck paintings, what can be in Genova, or can be anywhere, or the Rubens, or even more modern. All the Impressionists, from Van Gogh to Renoir to...
Of course. Many of the great museums have
Picasso,
extraordinary portraits, including the National Gallery. And, for example, the National Gallery will open an exhibition of Gauguin's portraits in October. So, we don't have the monopoly on portraiture, but what's different is that there...
you only have that.
Exactly, yeah.
You have no landscape,
no
abstract, no nature mort.
No. So just a specific focus on portraiture, but also the other galleries and museums, they're looking at portraiture really through the artists primarily, whereas we're the opposite. We're looking at portraiture because of the sitter. But we're just as much about biography and history as we are about art. It's a very particular mix.
So the difference is that when you come here, you're not coming to see Goya or to see Turner, or you're coming to see
no Goya.
Portrait.
Yeah, we have extraordinary works of art too, whether it's Holbein or Van Dyck or many other things, but that's not our key defining feature.
And besides the shows, obviously, because a show can be seen by many different people, is it very much linked to British people, to students, to general public?
Yeah, all of the above. We have a mix of international and British visitors, all age ranges, all different backgrounds, and people come here for many different reasons. So, for example, often an international visitor to London coming to the gallery for the first time might want to get a sense of British history or the culture. So that's one purpose. Other people are repeat visitors and come here often and know the collection very well, and maybe they want to come and see one particular portrait or do research into... the other thing is that we relate directly to the national curriculum for school children. So, for example, you learn about the Tudors, you probably want to come here to see the Tudors. Yeah. So we have many different remits and roles.
What is funny is that you have a large portrait of Jacob Rothschild by Freud, and a very small portrait of the Queen. Was the Queen very upset by the small portrait?
Of Freud, that Freud did.
Well,
we don't have that. That's actually the Royal Collection.
It doesn't belong to you.
No. That's in the Royal Collection. We have 1,000 portraits of the Queen, which is extraordinary.
Of this Queen?
Yeah.
1,000 portraits?
1,000. Many of those are photographs again, but we have great paintings. We have the Anagoni painting, which is very famous. We have extraordinary things.
You have many portraits of very famous people in British history, right?
Yeah.
They might have paintings of the royals, they have paintings of Churchill.
Of course, yeah.
Other Nelson or Wellington, as you said before.
We try not to have any gaps, so if there's been a notable person in British history, they don't have to be British, but they have to have had an impact here, like Malala, for example. We try to make sure they're represented.
But you have artists, actors,
everything, athletes, movie stars.
And is it hard not to be in the portrait gallery? Is there a queue of people who somehow would like to be here, or
I'm sure. But
what is the criteria when you commission a painting? What is your criteria?
So the trustees every year discuss sitters that they feel should be represented because of their impact or achievement, and then we decide once we have that shortlist, and it's always people that are in different fields, whether it's architects, engineers, people that have done extraordinary things in charity and philanthropy, scientists, all different disciplines. So we always make sure we have a...
And who are the artists you commission?
Well, then we decide, I work with the curators to think about which artist would best be able to...
And more or less, how many portraits you commission per year?
Commission every year, 5, 6. And then, of course, acquisitions, many, many more.
Acquisitions, what happens? You have people all around the world telling you there is an auction, that.
Yeah, we find things.
It depends.
We find things. We get some very good things at auction. We do very well at auction.
And when you say that most of a large part of the museum goes on loan around the country or abroad, what happens? You make the choice, or you say these will go, or they ask for something specific, or
it depends. I mean, we have a long-standing partnership with the National Trust. So 2 different National Trust properties have a lot of our works on display, on loan, on view. And we work with other National Trust properties throughout the country. We get loan requests. We initiate things. So we have this project right now called Coming Home, and that's why Dylan Thomas is in Swansea. We lend a portrait back to the place in the country that sitter or artist is associated with. So, for example, Dylan Thomas is in Swansea, Tracy Emin is in Margate, David Beckham will be in Essex, William Wilberforce will go to Hull, David Hockney is in Bradford. And it's a way to make people feel proud of where they're from, but also feel connected.
So you send them in their own place of birth?
Yeah.
But you don't ask to David Hockney if he's willing to them?
Oh yeah, we would.
You do?
As a courtesy, we would let the people know. It's rare that they would say no.
But they probably would like better to be here.
Well, it's both. You know, I mean, this is we're talking about a period of maybe 3 months.
Just on loan.
No, we're not just deep session. Yeah.
So at the moment, one is there.
It's on the website as well. There's a list of. It's a nice idea, and it's going to be 50 works over the next couple of years.
Alain Elkann interviews.